Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for pulling together this set of people to testify, and I appreciate your testimony because I think we all recognize that we are at a real crossroads, that it is a historic moment reflective of a deep commitment this country has made to finding a way forward to constrain Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. And so it's very important, I think, and I think you see here that we're all taking advantage of your testimony to really ask some of the hard questions that I think we all have to be comfortable with as we make our decisions going forward. And so, number one, I think much of the discussion has sort of strayed away from the goal of the agreement, and the goal of that agreement, of this agreement, as set out by Secretary Kerry, President Obama, Secretary Moniz, who was so much a part of it, was to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, at least for the next 10 to 15 years. And I think much of our discussion has sort of strayed from that to focus more on the impact of sanctions relief, the kind of funding opportunities that it will present. And in that context, Mr. Singh, I appreciate that you sort of validated the $50 billion figure that Secretary Liu has put out there as a reasonable number that might be made available to Iran. Not a small one, but we've heard much larger numbers. So as we have this discussion, I think it's good that it's rooted in what really is possible. But I wanted to get to you, Mr. Alterman, because you have said that it's an adequate deal, that in the context of preventing Iran from developing a nuclear weapon for the next 10 to 15 years, that it is adequate to holding Iran accountable. But you've also said in your written statement the success or failure of the agreement hinges on implementation, and I think we all know that. Many of our questions do revolve around that. So can you tell me in your mind what the key factors are to a successful implementation, what that would look like? We've heard some concerns about the human dimension, that in the end it's up to people, part of the IAEA, sort of making decisions as to how to move forward where they suspect that there's some shenanigans going on. So we can never get away from that altogether. That's the nature of this agreement in general, any agreement in general. But what do you see successful implementation hinging upon going forward?
Congresswoman, it seems to me there are two aspects to this. One is that you can keep the countries that are enforcing this agreement intent on enforcing the agreement. That if somebody sees something that is distressing, that the countries will act together to investigate something distressing and be determined to hold the Iranians to account for that. That, of course, comes in a whole complex set of relationships that we all have with each other and other kinds of interests. But again, I think the last dozen years, we've worked reasonably closely on this. The Russians and the Chinese haven't gone their own way. And so I'm cautiously optimistic, although certainly not certain, that we can keep this inspection side moving. The other piece, of course, is what the Iranians decide to do. And in my studies of Iran, it seems to me that we often assume that they don't really have politics, that we assume they don't have factions, that we assume there's one guy with a beard in a room making all the decisions. And the more I understand about Iran, the more I understand they have brutal politics. People fighting for resources, people fighting for power, people fighting for influence. I think one of the uncertainties in all of this is, are there ways that this deal would lead to more constructive Iranian politics that would lead to more constructive Iranian behavior? And that's certainly a hope of this deal. I'm not sure it's necessary, but I think one of the promises of the deal is that you can create enough incentives for people who want Iran to be much more of a normal state, much less of a revolutionary cause, to have more influence in Iran.
What do you see Congress's role being in encouraging the successful implementation of this?
And I think also making clear that if Iran is to improve its behavior, that American companies would feel much freer to go into Iran. And if Iran is playing games, then Congress would be very serious about not allowing American companies to go in. In my conversations with people in oil companies, one of the interesting things is just how conscious they are of exactly where the legal line is for what they can talk about, what they'd want to do in Iran. And they keep that line very bright and very far away from anything they want to say or do. And I think that is helpful, and the Iranians should know that we're paying attention to what they do, and we will act accordingly.
Thank you. My time is up.